So this is actually from the Daily Wire. Efforts to remove Trump from 2024 ballot using 14th Amendment ramp up. Efforts to remove former President Donald Trump from state ballots in the 2024 election are ramping up nationwide after critics argued the leading Republican contender is constitutionally disqualified from serving as president after he engaged in insurrection against the United States. Trump, who is leading the GOP primaries by a landslide, faces 4 separate indictments along the East Coast, including charges related to hush money, classified documents, election interference, and racketeering. Trump has broadly denied any wrongdoing in the charges brought against him and has claimed politically motivated forces are targeting him in a witch hunt propagated by the Biden administration and Democrat prosecutors. But now opponents across the political spectrum of the former president are arguing that under the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment, Trump is barred from holding office ever again after the January 6th Capitol attack. Lawrence Kaplan, a Florida tax attorney, became the first to challenge Trump's candidacy for president in federal court last week, pointing to the amendment's disqualification clause that says those who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the government cannot hold office. He told The Hill that the former president's grand jury indictments in Washington, D.C., election interference federal case, and the Georgia case stemming from alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election make his disqualification automatic, despite neither indictment accusing Trump of inciting the mob that attacked the Capitol. Quote, the bottom line here is that President Trump both engaged in an insurrection and also gave aid and comfort to other individuals who are engaging in such actions within the clear meaning of those terms as defined in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, end quote. Kaplan wrote in a filing last week challenging Trump's eligibility to run for office again. Quote, assuming that the public record to date is accurate and we have no evidence to the contrary, Trump is no longer eligible to seek the office of the President of the United States or of any other state of the Union, end quote. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1868 in the aftermath of the Civil War during the Reconstruction era and was designed to represent a new birth of freedom for previously disenfranchised citizens, according to Cornell University's Legal Information Institute. The amendment's disqualification clause was written to bar those who had joined the Confederacy from serving in the state or federal office, but would theoretically still apply to those who engage in future rebellions or insurrections against the U.S. I'm going to go ahead and stop it there because the article goes on for a while, but I think it's really interesting to see that so many individuals now on both political parties are calling for Trump to be removed from the ballot. It's not surprising because obviously we know of individuals within the Republican Party that are very much never Trumpers, and some of them, can say that they have personally been scorned by Donald Trump. Others just hate him because they just don't like how he talks or they don't like his policies or whatever the case may be. But either way, this is sort of where, to Carmen's point earlier about Trump surrendering, ultimately it's very clear that they're going to paint him as a criminal and try to get him removed. And I think one of the biggest things that the Trump camp, both his supporters and his campaign, really need to answer is what's going to be their answer to these efforts to have him removed. So, Chris, I think I lost you there. We'll wait for you to come back in. But either way, those of you watching, to my point, that really is the big question that so many are not answering. They're not saying whether or not the Trump campaign has a backup plan for handling him being removed from the ballot altogether. And many of his supporters are not answering that question as well. There's maybe a select few that are starting to game plan, but Chris, what was your initial reaction to the article now that we have you back?
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't think my internet was just going to cut out like that. I don't mean to, I guess, quote my boss, but I think he has a point. Civil War. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to just say what he's saying, right? He doesn't tell us anything to say. Before I even knew who Tim was back in 2015, 2016, when that whole shit went down, I remember thinking in the back of my mind, watching the response, I couldn't articulate what I was seeing, but all I knew in the back of my head was like, oh shoot, are we actually moving towards some kind of like a conflict? This is it's not good. But I mean, I find it ironic that it's happening in Florida of all places, where they had such a heavy conservative turnout in the last 2022 midterm election. Why aren't they trying to remove him in California? Why aren't they trying to remove him in New York? Why is it Florida?
Yeah. I think there is an effort in California as well, but I think Florida is the one that's gotten the most progress towards actually making it happen.
Right. And look at the language that they keep using. Insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they keep using that term? Is it because that's the only term that I guess they could have some legs for whatever, they're trying to pass to get them off the ballot? I mean, I remember when January 6th happened, all I thought was like, oh, that's crazy. It looks like a riot. Wow.
Right.
And then I was looking at what Trump's saying. I'm looking at what he's tweeting. And I was like, oh man, that's crazy. And then the reaction to it was just so out of proportion to what I was watching. It was bad, don't get me wrong.
Oh, for sure.
But the reaction of this whole insurrection was like, what? Did we watch the same exact thing happen? Because I remember, I'm thinking back to like, how many times have I seen all these abortion activists storm their state capitol? And
right.
That we didn't call that insurrection. I mean, so, and then the even funnier thing was to watch the fall of Kabul that same year in August.
Yeah.
And, just the imagery coming out of people in their, I guess, whatever state capitol building you would call that, holding guns. And it's just like, okay, yeah, that was an insurrection. And you take what happened on January 6th. I'm like, wait, so they didn't have guns and nobody. The only person that actually died was a Trump supporter. I mean, you're overplaying your hand. Okay, this was not insurrection, but they have to keep the narrative going because that's the only thing that's going to actually hold any weight if they try to go forward with removing him from the ballot. If they remove him from the ballot, again, it's a Rubicon. Where do you go after that? I don't know, and that's one of the things that does terrify me is if he becomes the nominee. I guess what's the precedent for that? If it's one thing, I guess, if California removes him from the ballot, we already know California is going to go blue no matter what.
For sure.
So the fact that it's happening in Florida is, I have to assume that people know what they're doing. On the same token, though, I still think that it's completely a violation of just anybody who's willing to vote for a man who is duly elected in their primary, even for California, to remove him from the ballot. Because you are telling your own constituents, you are telling citizens they cannot vote for somebody who they voted for, who they have selected to be their nominee. That's really dangerous territory, and I'm terrified to see what happens.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you're right. There's no good place to go from there. I mean, what do you do? The only way that I see ending this, and I really hope I'm wrong, I hope that there's a better solution, but I immediately think the only way that's going to work is if other people on the left hand of the aisle start getting indicted as well, by a Republican attorney general or something to the effect, Republican DA. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen because it seems like Republicans just need to sit on their hands all the time. Apparently that's a job requirement. But I mean, the only way I see this slowing down is if mutual destruction is assured. And when one side is able to do whatever they want and get away with it, they're just going to keep doing it. And it's hard. You don't want to get to this point where we're just doing tit for tat. But at the same time, right now, it's just one side is throwing punches while the other side's just sitting there with their hands behind their back, getting punched in the face. And at some point, there needs to be some self-defense. And unfortunately, I don't know when we're going to see it. Devon said indictments are not evidence over on YouTube. And exactly, unfortunately, they don't care. And that's where like Chris said, it's getting dangerous. I don't know where we go from here. I'm hoping that things can sort of calm down and the temperature can drop a bit. But I mean, the reality is, regardless of who becomes the nominee, it's not just Trump that they have this hatred towards. I mean, if the nominee ends up being DeSantis, or if it ends up being Vivek or anyone else, the reality is it's going to be the exact same type of targeting towards whoever's the next front runner. And the only way that a front runner won't be targeted is if they're a part of that establishment. To be honest, I'd be more concerned if someone got in and wasn't being targeted the same way Trump was. That'd be almost more concerning at this point, because it's very obvious that, Trump makes the joke of they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. And as great of a canned line as that has become, there is still truth to that. The reality is, we see them going after the alternate electorates in Michigan. We see the way that people who are there on January 6th are being treated. I mean, the reality is they are after just anyone who is to the right of Bernie Sanders. And unfortunately, that's not going to stop anytime soon unless something changes. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a peaceful solution, because I don't know where we go from here.
I don't know if there can be a peaceful solution. I want there to be, but in the same respect, like when you're talking about constitutional convention of states and some kind of a separation, there's going to be conflict. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
And the chances of that conflict becoming some kind of, whether that's open, what's the word I'm looking for? Kinetic warfare. I don't know. Whether that's cutting off supply chains, I don't know. But I mean, something's going to happen. There's going to be some kind of a conflict. It's not going to be just a quick, easy thing, if that was to even happen in the first place. I thought the same exact thing back during 2020, where I was, it seems like the only way out of it is through some kind of conflict. How do you get back to a place where you have your individual freedom back without fighting for it, in whatever way that means? And that's because I don't want anybody to clip this. That's not me saying, be violent. That's not me saying anything. I'm just saying, like, there is no way out of this except out. You know what I mean?
Right. No way out but through. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Yeah, because lost my train of thought there. I had something a moment ago. It'll come to me. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The reality is we don't have any real solutions, unless something changes. And I fear that any of the sort of people waiting in the wings behind Trump, I don't know if they're going to cut it.